My friends, I want to talk to you today about something that is essential to your well-being, your purpose, and your future. Something that has the power to elevate you or to bind you in chains of stagnation. I want to talk to you about knowing when it is time to walk away. And not just walking away, but walking away with dignity, with purpose, and with clarity, especially when you are not appreciated. Now, I want you to understand, appreciation is not simply about receiving compliments, accolades, or applause. Appreciation in its true form is about recognizing and valuing the essence of who you are, your purpose, your contributions, and your presence. But what happens when you find yourself in a place where your value is consistently overlooked, when your presence is taken for granted, when your contributions are met with indifference? What happens when you give and yet receive nothing in return? That is when you must make a difficult but necessary decision, the decision to walk away. Let me tell you, walking away is not an act of defeat. Walking away is an act of wisdom. It is an act of understanding the season you are in and the direction you are meant to go. It is an act of protecting your own spirit and guarding the treasure that God has placed within you. One of the greatest revelations you can have in life is the revelation of your own worth. You see, until you know your worth, you will tolerate things you are not meant to tolerate. You will settle for relationships, environments, and situations that diminish you instead of building you. You will accept mediocrity when you were designed for excellence. You will allow others to place limitations on you when God has given you the capacity for limitless potential. When you don't know your worth, you will find yourself chasing after approval, validation, and affirmation from people who may never give it to you. You will bend yourself into shapes you were never meant to fit into, trying to please people who may never recognize your true value. You will compromise your principles, your standards, and your vision just to feel accepted. And let me tell you, that is not what God intended for your life. God has placed a unique calling, a unique purpose, a unique assignment inside of you. There is something you were created to do that no one else can do in the way that you can do it. But if you don't recognize your own worth, you will allow people to reduce you to something far less than what you were created to be. When you walk into a room, you must understand that you carry something valuable. You carry the essence of God's purpose for your life. You carry gifts, talents, insights, and wisdom that have been shaped by your experiences, your trials, and your relationship with God. You carry within you the seeds of greatness. But if you don't know your worth, you will allow others to dictate your value, and they will always undervalue you. Listen to me carefully. When someone does not appreciate your worth, it is not your job to convince them. It is not your job to beg for recognition. It is not your job to shrink yourself down in hopes that they will one day see the value in you. No, my friends. When someone does not appreciate your worth, it is your job to walk away. There are dangers associated with staying in environments where you are not valued. The first danger is that you begin to doubt your own value. When you surround yourself with people who do not appreciate you, who do not acknowledge your contributions, who do not see the beauty and power of your potential, you start to internalize their lack of appreciation. You start to question whether you are really as valuable as you thought. You start to wonder whether your gifts are worth sharing, whether your dreams are worth pursuing, whether your voice is worth raising. The second danger is that you become comfortable with being undervalued. You settle into a pattern of being overlooked, being ignored, being taken for granted. You start to think that this is normal. You start to believe that this is just the way life is. And once you become comfortable with being undervalued, you stop striving for more. You stop pushing yourself to reach your full potential. You stop dreaming big dreams. You stop taking risks. You stop stepping out in faith because you have been conditioned to believe that what you have to offer is not significant. But I want to tell you today, do not allow anyone to make you feel insignificant. Do not allow anyone to make you feel small. Do not allow anyone to convince you that you do not matter. You were created by God for a purpose, and that purpose is far too important to be diminished by someone's lack of appreciation. Walking away is not just about leaving a situation, it's about moving towards something greater. When you walk away from an environment where you are not appreciated, you are not simply retreating. You are advancing. You are stepping into a new season, a new chapter, a new opportunity to be in a place where your gifts are recognized, where your contributions are valued, where your presence is appreciated. But here's the key: you must walk away with purpose. You must walk away with clarity about who you are and what you carry. You must walk away with an understanding that your value is not determined by the opinions of others, but by the truth of who God says you are. When you walk away, do not walk away in bitterness. Do not walk away in anger. Do not walk away in frustration. Walk away in peace. Walk away in confidence. Walk away with your head held high, knowing that you are making room for something better. You see, sometimes we hold on to relationships, to jobs, to situations that no longer serve us because we are afraid of the unknown. We are afraid that if we let go, we won't find anything better. We are afraid that if we walk away, we will be left empty-handed. But let me tell you, when you walk away from what no longer serves you, you are making space for what God has in store for you. God cannot pour new blessings into a vessel that is already full. Sometimes you have to empty yourself of the things that are draining you, the things that are weighing you down, the things that are hindering your growth in order to receive the new thing that God wants to do in your life. Walking away is not about loss, it's about making room for gain. Walking away is not about giving up, it's about stepping up to a higher level. Let's talk about relationships for a moment. Relationships are one of the primary areas where appreciation or lack thereof becomes evident. When you are in a relationship, whether it is a friendship, a partnership, or even a family relationship, appreciation is the foundation that keeps it healthy and thriving. Appreciation is the acknowledgement of the other person's value, contributions, and presence in your life. But what happens when you are in a relationship where appreciation is absent? What happens when you give your time, your energy, your love, and your resources, but it is met with indifference or even entitlement? What happens when you sacrifice for someone, but they do not even take the time to say thank you? What happens when you pour into someone, but they never pour back into you? Let me tell you, that is a dangerous place to be. Because when you stay in a relationship where you are not appreciated, you start to feel depleted. You start to feel drained. You start to feel like you are giving from an empty cup. And when you give from an empty cup, you are not operating in the fullness of who you are. You are operating out of a deficit. And when you operate out of a deficit, you cannot fulfill your purpose to the best of your ability. God did not create you to be depleted. He did not create you to be drained. He did not create you to be in relationships that take more than they give. God created you to flourish, to thrive, to be in relationships that are mutually edifying, where both parties appreciate and value one another. Relationships are meant to be reciprocal. They are meant to be a space where both people give and receive, where both people honor and value each other's presence. When this balance is lost, when one person is consistently giving while the other is consistently receiving without acknowledgement, there is an imbalance, a disharmony. This is not the design that God intended for relationships. We see this principle of reciprocity reflected throughout Scripture. In Proverbs 27:17, it says, iron sharpens iron. So one person sharpens another. This is a picture of mutual edification. Both people are made better. Both people are sharpened. Both people are uplifted. But if one person is constantly dulling the other without ever sharpening them in return, it becomes an unhealthy dynamic. Now, I want to be clear, walking away from a relationship where you are not appreciated does not mean that you are walking away from your responsibilities or from love. In fact, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to walk away. Why? Because when you continue to give of yourself in an environment where you are not appreciated, you are not only diminishing your own value, but you are also enabling the other person to continue in their lack of appreciation. You are allowing them to remain in a place of immaturity where they take without giving, where they expect without acknowledging. By walking away, you are setting a boundary. You are saying, I will no longer allow myself to be undervalued. I will no longer allow myself to be taken for granted. You are teaching others how to treat you by the way you treat yourself. And sometimes people need to experience your absence in order to appreciate your presence. Let's move beyond personal relationships for a moment and talk about appreciation in the workplace. Many of you are in jobs or careers where you feel unappreciated. You work hard, you go above and beyond, you bring creativity, dedication, and excellence to everything you do, but it feels like no one notices. Your contributions are overlooked, your efforts are taken for granted, and you are not given the recognition you deserve. I want to remind you today that your worth is not determined by your position or by the recognition or lack thereof that you receive in your workplace. Your worth comes from God, and He is the one who sees everything you do, even when no one else does. Colossians 3:23-24 tells us, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. However, there comes a time when you must evaluate whether the environment you are in is conducive to your growth and to the fulfillment of your purpose. You were not created to merely exist in a place where your gifts are stifled, where your creativity is suppressed, and where your value is diminished. You were created to thrive in environments that challenge you, that recognize your talents, and that push you toward your destiny. If you find yourself in a workplace where you are consistently undervalued, where your contributions are met with indifference, and where there is no room for advancement or growth, it may be time to consider walking away. Now, I'm not telling you to quit your job tomorrow without a plan. Walking away requires wisdom. It requires discernment. It requires seeking God's direction. But if you are in a place where you are not appreciated, do not be afraid to explore new opportunities, to seek out environments where your gifts can flourish and where your contributions will be valued. Staying in environments where you are not appreciated comes with a cost. And that cost is often greater than you realize. When you stay in a place where you are not valued, you begin to internalize that lack of appreciation. You start to believe that maybe you don't deserve better, that maybe this is the best you can do, that maybe this is as good as it gets. But let me tell you, that is a lie. That is not the truth of who you are. You see, staying in environments where you are not appreciated not only affects your mental and emotional health, but it also affects your spiritual well-being. When you allow yourself to remain in a place where you are not valued, you are, in essence, telling God that you are willing to accept less than what He has for you. You are saying, God, I know you have called me for greatness, but I'm going to settle for mediocrity. You are saying, God, I know you have given me gifts and talents, but I'm going to hide them because no one here appreciates them. But God did not call you to hide your light. Matthew 5:16 says, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Your light cannot shine in an environment that does not recognize its brightness. Your gifts cannot flourish in a place where they are not appreciated. There is a cost to staying where you are not valued, and that cost is often your purpose. When you remain in a place where you are not appreciated, you are not operating in the fullness of your purpose. You are not using your gifts to their fullest potential. You are not stepping into the destiny that God has for you. And that, my friends, is too high a cost to pay. Now, let me bring this into a spiritual context. Even God, in his infinite love and patience, gives us examples of when it is time to walk away. In the scriptures, we see that God is long-suffering, slow to anger, and abounding in love. But there are also times when God steps back and allows people to experience the consequences of their actions when they do not appreciate his presence. One of the clearest examples of this is found in the Old Testament, in the story of the Israelites. Time and time again, God rescued them, provided for them, and showed them his love. Yet time and time again, they turned away from him, took his blessings for granted, and did not appreciate his presence in their lives. In Jeremiah 7:13-15, God says to the Israelites, while you were doing all these things, declares the Lord, I spoke to you again and again, but you did not listen. I called you, but you did not answer. Therefore, what I did to Shiloh, I will now do to the house that bears my name. The temple you trust in, the place I gave to you and your ancestors. I will thrust you from my presence, just as I did all your fellow Israelites, the people of Ephraim. Even God, in his perfect wisdom and love, knows when it is time to withdraw his presence when he is not appreciated. And if God himself sets that example, how much more should we, as his children, follow his lead? Walking away is an act of setting boundaries. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They are about protecting what is valuable. And what is more valuable than the purpose God has placed inside of you? What is more valuable than the gifts he has given you? What is more valuable than your relationship with him and your ability to fulfill his calling on your life? When you walk away from environments, relationships, or situations where you are not appreciated, you are setting a boundary. You are saying, I value myself enough to not allow anyone to diminish my worth. I value the gifts that God has given me, and I will not allow them to be squandered in a place where they are not appreciated. I value my purpose, and I will not settle for less than what God has for me. Boundaries are necessary for growth. Boundaries are necessary for health. Boundaries are necessary for fulfilling your God-given purpose. And sometimes the most important boundary you can set is the decision to walk away from what no longer serves you. I know that walking away is not easy. It can be one of the hardest decisions you will ever make. There is fear associated with walking away. Fear of the unknown. Fear of being alone. Fear of not finding anything better. Fear of making the wrong decision. But let me remind you of this fear is not from God. 2 Timothy 1:7 tells us, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Walking away requires faith. It requires trusting that God has something better for you on the other side. It requires believing that you are worth more than what you are currently receiving. It requires knowing that your value does not decrease because someone else fails to see it. Your value remains constant because it is rooted in who God created you to be, not in how others perceive you. Walking away is an act of faith. It is an act of trusting that God will lead you to a place where you are appreciated, where your gifts are valued, and where your purpose can be fulfilled. It is an act of trusting that God will provide for you, even when it seems like there are no other options. It is an act of trusting that God is in control and that He will guide you to where you need to be. Walking away is more than a mere physical act. It is a spiritual journey. It is an act of releasing control and surrendering to God's greater plan for your life. Many times, the fear of walking away stems from a desire to control the outcome. You see, as human beings, we like to know what's next. We like to have a clear map, a clear path, a clear destination. But walking away often requires stepping into the unknown, into a place where you have no guarantees, no assurances, no roadmap. And that, my friends, is where faith comes in. Hebrews 11:1 tells us that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. When you walk away from what is not serving you, from environments where you are not appreciated, you are stepping into a space of faith. You are believing that even though you cannot see the next step, God has already prepared the way. You are trusting that even though you do not know what lies ahead, God has already ordained it for your good. In Genesis 12:1, God called Abraham to leave his country, his people, and his father's household and go to a land that He would show him. Abraham didn't know where he was going. He didn't have all the details. But he walked away in faith, trusting that God's plan was greater than his present situation. And what happened? God made Abraham the father of many nations. God blessed him beyond what he could have imagined. Sometimes God is calling you to walk away not because He wants you to lose something, but because He wants to bless you with something greater. But you can receive the greater thing if you are still holding on to what is less. You can't step into the new season if you are still clinging to the old one. You can't embrace the new blessings if your hands are full of the things that are depleting you. One of the reasons people struggle to walk away is because they feel a sense of responsibility for the situation they are in. You might think, if I just try harder, maybe they will appreciate me, or if I just give a little more, maybe they will see my worth. Or if I just hold on a little longer, maybe things will change. But let me tell you something, you are not responsible for other people's inability to recognize your value. You are not responsible for fixing someone else's broken perception of you. You are not responsible for making someone else see your worth. You are only responsible for stewarding the gifts and the calling that God has placed inside of you. And sometimes that stewardship requires you to walk away from those who cannot or will not appreciate what you carry. Jesus Himself demonstrated this principle. In Mark 6:4, Jesus said, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives and in his own home." Even Jesus, the Son of God, was not appreciated by everyone. And what did He do? He did not force Himself upon those who did not value Him. He did not beg for their approval or chase after their validation. He walked away and took His message to those who were ready to receive it. In the same way, there will be people who do not recognize the anointing, the gifts, the purpose that God has placed inside of you. There will be environments that are not conducive to your growth. There will be situations where your presence is taken for granted. And when you find yourself in those places, you must have the courage to walk away. One of the hardest parts about walking away is the fear of being alone. You may wonder, if I walk away from this relationship, will I ever find another one? Or if I leave this job, will I find something better? Or if I distance myself from this group of friends, will I be left with no one? Let me reassure you, my friends, you are never truly alone. Even in the moments when it feels like you are walking away by yourself, God is with you. Psalm 23:4 says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. God will never leave you nor forsake you. He will walk with you through every valley, every desert, every wilderness season. But beyond that, walking away often makes room for the right people to enter your life. Sometimes we hold on to relationships, jobs, or situations out of fear of loneliness, not realizing that God has better connections, better opportunities, and better environments waiting for us. But we cannot receive the new if we are still clinging to the old. Walking away creates space for God to bring new relationships into your life, relationships that are built on mutual appreciation, respect, and love. It creates space for new opportunities that align with your purpose and allow you to flourish. It creates space for new seasons of growth, development, and fulfillment. Timing is everything when it comes to walking away. You see, there are moments when you feel the stirring in your spirit that it is time to move on, but fear, doubt, or uncertainty cause you to delay. And sometimes that delay can cost you opportunities and blessings. Ecclesiastes 3:1 tells us that there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. There is a time to plant and there is a time to uproot. There is a time to stay and there is a time to leave. One of the keys to walking away with wisdom is discerning God's timing. When God begins to stir your spirit and reveal to you that a certain chapter of your life is coming to a close, it is important to listen. It is important to pay attention to the signs, the shifts, the changes that are happening around you. God is always speaking to us, but we must be tuned in to hear his voice. Sometimes God will allow certain situations to become uncomfortable as a way of signaling that it is time to move on. What once felt fulfilling now feels empty. What once brought you joy now brings you frustration. What once aligned with your purpose now feels like a burden. These are often signs that God is preparing you for a transition. When you feel this shift happening, do not ignore it. Do not try to force yourself to stay in a place where God is calling you to leave. Trust that God's timing is perfect. Trust that when he says it's time to walk away, it's because he has something better waiting for you. Prayer is essential when it comes to walking away. You must seek God's guidance in every step of the process. Before you make the decision to leave, before you take that step into the unknown, spend time in prayer. Ask God for clarity. Ask him for wisdom. Ask him for confirmation. James 1:5 tells us, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. God is not a God of confusion. He is a God of order. He will not leave you in a state of uncertainty. If you seek him with all your heart, he will guide you. Sometimes walking away is not an immediate decision. Sometimes God may ask you to stay in a situation for a season while he prepares you for the transition. This is why prayer is so important. Through prayer, you can discern whether God is calling you to walk away now or whether he is asking you to remain for a little while longer. Either way, it is crucial that you stay in alignment with his timing and his will. Prayer also strengthens you for the journey ahead. Walking away is not easy. It requires courage, resilience, and faith. But through prayer, you can receive the strength you need to take that step. Philippians 4:13 reminds us, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. When you lean on God in prayer, he will give you the strength to walk away with peace, confidence, and grace. Walking away is often a test of your faith. It is a test of whether you truly believe that God has something better for you. It is a test of whether you trust him enough to let go of what is familiar, what is comfortable, and what is known in exchange for the unknown. In Genesis 19, we read the story of Lot and his family as they were instructed by the angels to flee from Sodom and Gomorrah. They were told to leave everything behind and not to look back. But Lot's wife, in her hesitation and attachment to what she was leaving behind, looked back and she turned into a pillar of salt. This story is a powerful reminder that when God calls you to walk away, you must do so with your whole heart. You cannot look back with regret, longing, or attachment to the past. You must walk away in faith, believing that what lies ahead is greater than what you are leaving behind. Walking away is a test of whether you are willing to trust God's plan for your life, even when it doesn't make sense. It is a test of whether you are willing to believe that his thoughts are higher than your thoughts and his ways are higher than your ways, Isaiah 55:8-9. It is a test of whether you are willing to release control and allow God to lead you into a new season.